So, Senator Braggs, you have been a pivotal figure in sculpting the Digital Assets Bill. And despite the fact that it was ultimately rejected by Senate, I think a lot of really great things came from the bill, especially the catalyst to really open these discussions to the floor. So, I just want to know, were you expecting it to be rejected considering it was in the Labor Party's the power was there, or what were your feelings when it did ultimately get rejected?
Well, I'm in the Liberal Party. I mean, the Labor Party have a policy of sort of not doing many good things for Australia, unfortunately. They're the government at the moment. So the good thing about democracy is the Australian people have a chance to dispatch them next time we have an election. Look, I mean, the bill it's in the Senate. It's been rejected in the sense that the government don't want to pursue it. But we think that in the Liberal Party that it's better to establish a system of regulation for Australia now, because not only are consumers exposed to an unregulated market, but we believe fervently that it's one of those areas where if you legislate a framework, you will be able to capture more investment, because there's so much uncertainty about investing into crypto across the globe. I believe the jurisdictions which establish laws to regulate crypto will be the jurisdictions which attract more of the capital. Now, in Australia, we have an incentive to do that because we're a nation of oligopolies, right? We want to see more competition come to the fore. We want to see our citizens benefit from the disruption that the technology brings. And so I think the Labor Party and the government are missing a real opportunity here.
Yes,
Yep.
I agree with that. And so, what would you say with some of the criticisms that we heard about it essentially being maybe too broad or lacked detail?
Oh, well, that's just politics. I mean, the Labor Party don't like it because it's not their idea.
Yeah.
That's how politics goes, which is why everyone hates politicians. Fair enough, I get that. But they don't have any substantive critiques. I mean, they've been dragging their feet. They've been in government for 18 months now. And the Minister, Stephen Jones, is only really interested in what the unions and the big super funds want. Any other issues are not dealt with. And so the government's substantive critique is that my bill is crap because it doesn't have enough detail. That is their substantive point, I guess. Trying to be as fair and balanced here as I can.
Yeah.
But I would say to that the bill does create a framework for consumer protection. It requires people to have a license if they want to run an exchange or a brokerage, a broker style operation. And then you would fill in some of the detail by making regulations, which wouldn't be in the primary bill that the government would have anyway. So I think the main criticism is really just that they don't like it because it wasn't their idea.
Yeah, you see that a lot. Andrew, on that topic, for anyone who's listening and doesn't know much about your bill, could you please summarize some key points for our listeners to let them know what you want to introduce?
So, I mean, the bill at the moment is in the Senate, and what it does is it regulates digital assets businesses. So it establishes a system of licensing for markets, brokers, and it's a system of licensing the gatekeepers. So it doesn't regulate each token. It regulates business ABC, which has a license to run a market, and the obligations are on the market. So capital requirements, key personnel tests, risk management systems, management of tokens, hot and cold wallets and all that sort of stuff is all in the bill, okay? And so then you have a system which ensures that consumers are protected because you have a fulsome regulatory system. It also requires you to have a license if you want to issue a stablecoin, and you have to hold reserve capital equal to the value of the tokens on issue.
Yeah,
And
that's.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, that makes sense because a lot of the exchanges it'd be much like a bank essentially, and I know some exchanges in Australia are implementing proof of reserves using things like Merkle Tree or zero knowledge proofs, which is technology basis, but it's still not in law that they have to do it. Some are doing it out of the goodness of their customers, so to show stability in their ecosystem and let people know they're 100% back reserved. On the stable coins, Andrew, I know the stable coins are a bit funny because stable coins, they're actually a business. They're not a Federal Reserve. They're
Yep.
not a government. It's a business in themselves, which is risky. And there's different technology used in them, like Luna, which was algorithmic, which can have big consequences as well. But would we be looking at, like, I know you said 100% backed on stable coins, but would you be thinking more of fractionalized banking, like in our banking sector at the moment? If the bank has $1,000, they can loan out I think it's about 30,000. Is that something that could work in stable coins, or that would be a hard no?
I mean, the question would be, can you get a cash equivalent, or can you find a way to ensure that consumers have a reasonable level of protection? And I think the question is whether that is viable. I mean, what you don't want to do is to lock everything in stone. And I want to give you an example here. So when the Corporations Act was enacted over 20 years ago, we had a requirement for company documents to be executed with a actual pen, right? So a wet signature. Now, within about 5 years, that was seen to have major problems because people couldn't execute documents electronically. Law reform finally came when we had the COVID crisis, but it's a good example of, you don't want to lock into law a particular process or way of doing things that is going to be disrupted easily. Now, in your case of looking at this area, things will change quickly, which is why you want to have the flexibility of a regulation making power so that a minister can change it as things change. Now, this shows the ridiculousness of Labor's position, that they're saying that the bill hasn't got enough detail. I mean, that's by design. You want to have the fundamental principles in the bill, and then you want to have subordinate regulations that can be made as time goes on, because it took 20 years for the Parliament to pass a law to change the wet signature to a electronic signature requirement. 20 years. And the reason it took 20 years was because it was hard-coded in the law. So a minister couldn't just make a regulation. So I'm trying to make a point here that when you lock something into a law in Australia, it's locked in. It can't be changed unless Parliament changes the law. A regulation can just be made by a minister and tabled in Parliament.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Andrew. It's sort of you're building the foundation for you sort of build the foundation, but you can change what shed you want to put on it as time goes by. So yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for that, mate.
So, Senator Braggs, in terms of reaching a balance between innovation and consumer protection, what were some of the greatest obstacles you found having to implement that?
Well, when we ran the inquiry into crypto, there were a bunch of people who said we should give safe harbour to all the existing businesses. And my view was that would have been a green light to every shonk in town, and that we needed to move to a system of hard regulation, which means by definition that you're going to lose some innovation. Because when you set a capital standard, for example, for a digital currency exchange, you are going to wipe out some of the smaller businesses because they won't be able to bring the capital to the table. So you have to make a judgment and be honest about it as a policymaker, as a legislator, that this is the choice you've made, that you'd rather have you're prepared to lose some innovation in order to get a large chunk of consumer protection in order. And that is ultimately the judgment that I thought was right. And we want to see that law enacted in future. The problem we have, and the problem that Australia has, is we have a government that is not committed to this agenda. And I doubt there'll be any laws passed in this term of Parliament, which means we won't have crypto laws until probably 2026 at best.